Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby, and yesterday Wargaming highlighted Matchmaker 2.0 coming in Update 2.0 and why it's going to be fairer, sharper, and more engaging than ever. Now, the highlights of Matchmaking 2.0 is that there are going to be smarter team compositions, where, for example, super heavy tank destroyers are matched up against super heavy tank destroyers, and I guess refining autoloaders being matched up against autoloaders, although that still currently happens inside the game. There are going to be class limits for tactical variety, where the maximum tank destroyers that you're going to have at a game are 6 in extremely rare cases, which makes me question why Wargaming would put 6 in extremely rare cases but put 5 here. I guess they're arguing that if something only happens like in 3% of games, then it doesn't actually really happen. They're also saying that light tanks should be 3, although I do think that 2 is kind of the limit for me as to the sweet spot for light tanks. But I can understand why they would want to put 3, because otherwise there would probably be 2 light tanks in every single game that you play if you put like a hard limit there, and maybe increase the queue times for light tanks as well, which might not be desirable. And self-propelled guns will be limited to 3, which was already, as far as I'm aware, a feature inside World of Tanks. So why they're putting that out, that's another question. Wargaming are also going to enable more +1, -1 battles, which will be great for people who don't like +2, -2. Personally, for me, I like the variety, but I can understand if the majority of the audience now want +1, -1, that why Wargaming would be focusing on that. There are also going to be no more same tank armies, so you're not going to be getting lots of identical vehicles on a team. I think this is mostly for when they want to release an assembly shop tank and don't want it to kind of mess up the Matchmaker, although in my opinion, the Matchmaker's only kind of messed up really for release day, so whether we really needed that to have as a core benefit for the sacrifice that I'm about to highlight that all of this comes at, that's another question altogether. Wargaming are also suggesting there will be faster matches with smarter queue logic. Well, when I guess they say faster matches, hopefully they're talking about queue time and not actually faster matches inside the game, because that's definitely something that I don't think anyone really wants in World of Tanks. So Wargaming suggests that a unified queue lets the Matchmaker adapt in real time. The system aims to reduce waiting times and allows for balanced teams even during off-peak hours. However, this comes at one huge cost, ladies and gents, boys and girls, and that is a separate battle modes. Encounter, assault, and grand battles are being retired for now, which is freeing up Matchmaker resources previously spent on working several queues. And immediately, I do feel that Wargaming saying that it's being retired for now is to try and reduce player anxiety. Wargaming are quite rightly so wanting to do everything that they can to make sure that 2.0 is a big success, even if they want to, frankly, brush some things under the carpet that are being lost from the game. I genuinely think that if Wargaming could have made Assault and Encounter work with their new Matchmaker system, that they would have. And so their decision to remove it, I think 99% of the time we are not going to see it come back into the random queue. And now I want to highlight why I think that specifically the removal of Assault and Encounter, and also Grand Battles, although that's not really a big deal for me personally, is one of the worst changes, again, for me in World of Tanks history. So firstly, let's talk about a history of these game modes inside World of Tanks. Assault and Encounter were released in Update 0, although we didn't know it was 0 at the time, and I don't think Wargaming even knew, because they didn't put the 0 there, 0.7.4. That was released on the 21st of June 2012. That is kind of the period which Wargaming flag out to be a veteran in their event that's currently going on. These Assault and Encounter additions to the game, they predate the physics changes of 1.0, which was October in 2012. They predate the tier 10 mediums and tank destroyers going into the game. And they even predate the availability for gold ammo for credits changes. If that doesn't let you know how old these are in World of Tanks, they've pretty much been in the game since the very beginning. And yeah, Assault and Encounter are they're pretty much as much of a part of World of Tanks as anything that is inside the game. Wargaming continued to add and remove maps for the game modes, and certain maps such as Malinovka and San River, they don't actually exist in the game anymore. But I actually went digging and I found an awesome video from the one and only, the beautiful man that is the mighty Jingles, where he pitched in his opinion in a video which was released 13 years ago, pretty much as this happened. 8,600 views on OG Jingles' videos there, although, you know, that's about like 10 or 20 times higher now, right? And let's hear what Jingles had to say about Assault specifically on Malinovka when it was released.
Hi folks, welcome back to my World of Tanks replays with the mighty Jingles. And today I want to talk about what I consider to be the only attack defend scenario in the game that actually works, and that's here on Malinovka.
Pretty much. The only assault scenario in the game that worked, and that was on Malinovka, and Wargaming removed that. But look at that, boys and girls. Yes, there was an assault game mode at one point where the defending cap circle was kind of in the mini village below the hill, and the hill looks so different on Malinovka. Man, this is really scratching those itches of World of Tanks past. And I love catching Jingles' old YouTube videos. They do feel like you're going into a little bit of a time capsule of World of Tanks. You can see how I feel about when I'm just thinking about these core memories that Assault and Encounter added to the game for me. But anyway, I digress. Grand Battles were added in update 9.20 or 0.9.20 on the 29th of August 2017, which predate the graphics changes that I believe were released in 1.0 in April 2018. So once again, these game modes are as much of a part as World of Tanks as anything inside the game. So now I want to talk about the good things about removing Assault and Encounter. Firstly, 10-minute Assault battles can feel unrewarding for certain players. Fast wins can happen if one team does not protect the cap circle, both on Assault and also on Encounter. These do feel very frustrating, especially on something like Ghost Town, but really it is just a fundamental failure of one team if they don't protect a cap circle, and they're there for a reason. The reason why we have cap circles inside World of Tanks is to prevent people from just hiding in a corner. And one thing that Wargaming usually does well does enable players on Assault to cap the base if like one team goes and hides completely in the corner. Think about when you're playing on Corellia, there are rocks that protect you from a variety of positions. If you're thinking about Redshire Assault, for example, that kind of like big mound does allow players to hide on either side of it and force the defending team to have to risk hit points to be able to protect the cap circle. So I'd say that fast wins, apart from on Ghost Town, not so much really a problem for me personally. One of the biggest problems with Assault and Encounter is that World of Tanks is already like 40 maps big, and it's a lot to learn, especially for newer players. My argument would be, well, if it's too much, just uncheck Assault and Encounter until you feel like you want to add that variety back into the game, which is one of the beautiful things about those game modes and the checkboxes, is that you could actually decide which ones you want to play. And this also makes me think, does that mean in World of Tanks 2.0 that there's no way to uncheck random events inside the battles? I've got a funny feeling that random events might just happen randomly in 2.0, whether you like it or not, if Wargaming are not allowing people to choose which game modes they want to participate in. The main benefit, the good of removing Assault and Encounter, and also Grand Battles, is that by removing these game modes, Wargaming are reducing their computation costs on the Matchmaker, which allows them to make the more advanced 2.0 changes, whether you think that they're going to be that big of a deal to the game or not, and without increasing the queue times. Because effectively, what was happening in the system currently is the Matchmaker would have 4 different routes: a standard battle, an assault battle, an encounter battle, and a grand battle, and it would try to create these 4 different routes, and then it would try and gather players to be able to match into each of those pools. By removing 3 of them, I guess they're reducing the computation very ignorantly by like 3/4, which allows them to constrain it and to add extra things in the future. Now, it's hard to say, and again, I'm sure that Wargaming are the experts on this and not Uncle QuickyBaby, how much these servers actually cost them, either with the hardware or with just the running costs, and whether they could have just invested more in trying to get more raw horsepower into the system, but that's probably not the case. I think they're probably already getting the best of the best and always upgrading it as much as they can, investing the many millions that they make each time from loot boxes into making sure that the server hamsters are well fed. But at the end of the day, we are consumers. And we are not the ones who are making money from when things are purchased inside World of Tanks. And so it's very easy for us to sit back and say, hey, just work harder on making sure that it does work, or that there's more computation available to be able to do more fancy things with the Matchmaker. But undoubtedly, if any of you are players who don't play Assault and Encounter, you've had them disabled for years, then the fact that Wargaming are going to have more horsepower to be able to feed to the hamsters, or shall I say the hamsters are going to be running more efficiently by not having to create lots of different game modes, will allow them to make these changes in 2.0. And also, apparently, a very insignificant proportion of the player base play Assault and Encounter, so it's not the biggest of deals that it's going to be removed. This is always an interesting thing for me. I ran a poll, and from my poll, I saw that about 50%, 40 or 50% of players were actually playing Assault inside World of Tanks. I tried to get other creators to run polls as well, to ask their audiences whether they were playing Assault and Encounter, because I do think that maybe my audience will have a bit of bias. If I play Assault and Encounter and I play it on stream and I feature it in YouTube videos, then of course maybe my audience will be more inclined to play Assault and Encounter as well. So I'd be really interested to see if any of the creators out there, especially the ones who have Assault and Encounter disabled, if they were to run a very simple poll of did you guys have, I can't believe I'm having to talk about this in a past tense now. Did you guys have Assault and Encounter enabled? Yes or no? Or maybe just make it easy for like Assault. Did you have Assault enabled? Yes or no? And to actually see how much of the player base were playing Assault without having that kind of creator bias in it, for me would be really interesting, because I think we're talking about half the player base here, personally, or at least a third of the player base. I really doubt that this is a hugely insignificant proportion of the player base, and frankly, I feel insulted to be suggested that I am an insignificant proportion of the player base just for enjoying a game mode that has been there since before most people actually started playing the game. Now I want to talk about the bad things about Assault and Encounter being removed. Firstly, it adds a huge amount of variety to the game. It's not just you getting those same 10 maps that Wargaming seem to rotate out on maybe like for me it feels like it's a bi-weekly basis or sometimes even a daily basis. How they decide to do that is another question. But I'm sure a lot of you will notice that when you sit down and play World of Tanks, that maybe this is completely subjective and maybe a tinfoil hat moment, but it does feel that they try to have like a map pool for that given day that will be kind of rotated and replaced with other maps, rather than truly getting all 40 different maps in a variety and like a truly random nature on a given day. So for me, Assault and Encounter just added so much variety. It's amazing what you can do by just turning a map on its axis and just changing the spawns, and how it completely feels different. For example, when I get on Corellia Assault, which doesn't seem to happen very much since Wargaming screwed Assault and they screwed Encounter intentionally a year ago before I highlighted it, when they released random battle events, and they had to tune down the amount that you got Assault and Encounter on maps that did have random events to be able to, I guess, prevent people from getting those maps constantly. But you just disable Assault and Encounter if you're not interested in that. Don't know why they had to do that. And do you know what? The heartbreak is that I'm not sure if any of you noticed, but it's only recently that it started to work again. And so I thought maybe there's light at the end of the tunnel. Wargaming have finally managed to fix it. They're going to get Assault and Encounter working again for the future of World of Tanks, only to have this absolute guillotine drop of now just losing it from the game forever. But I digress. I've got a lot to say on the matter, so let's push on. But it's amazing to me how just shifting a map on its axis completely changes how it feels. Corellia Assault, in my opinion, one of the peak maps of World of Tanks. Beautiful. Forcing two teams, well, not forcing them, but encouraging two teams to attack down the edges of the map, going from a southeast to a southwest attack feels so different from going from a southwest to a northeast kind of attack on that map. And also then to encourage light tanks and medium tanks to go and fight it out in the middle of the map. Oh, it's just so beautiful. So much better than standard Corellia. So you know what? Maybe what Wargaming have to do is, oh no, they can't do that because, you know, it's just too advantageous for one team to have camps. But maybe Wargaming should try and mix it up a little bit with their standard maps by adding in a variety with having different spawns if they wanted to kind of bring back a little bit of that assault-esque. But that's kind of removing one to then have another. I digress. Look, one of the bad things about removing assault and encounter is that, irrelevant of what I said about there are already 40 maps, honestly, if you're half smart, it doesn't require relearning the entire map to play an assault version of a map. The actual positions don't change. The terrain doesn't change. What changes is you have to learn new attack routes. But those attack routes, at least for me, they're so satisfying, or at least they were so satisfying. And one thing I found personally is that every time that they added an assault map in the game, like fairly recently, I think in the last couple of years, they added in Steps Assault. And Steps Assault ended up making me a better player of Steps. It really taught me how to break through each of the flanks. And so I found that by playing Assault and making me think differently about the different attack routes and the different positions, that I did become a better player when I was playing the standard versions of those maps as well. And I guess if you think that I'm going to become a better player by playing different game modes, that is just adding depth to the maps, a new way to play, and such an easy new way to play from a development perspective from Wargaming. Now, I'm not talking about the computation. I'm talking about all they really have to do is just move one cap circle, remove the other cap circle, create 2 or 3 spawns, and then like turn the map round on an axis. And it just seems to work so well, at least for me. One thing that I love about Assault as well is that it forces one team to attack. And when one team has to attack, then I feel that the narrative of the battle flows better. Again, for me personally, you don't get those situations where both teams are camping out saying, hey, you come at me, bro, you come at me, bro. Literally, one team will win if the timer runs out. And so that forces the attacking team to make the bold plays, to take the risks. That does make World of Tanks an exciting game. And yes, no draws. You couldn't get draws, at least on Assault. You could get draws in Encounter, and you could definitely get draws in the Grand Battles game mode. But draws, one of the least satisfying feelings in World of Tanks, personally for me. And the fact that Assault literally led to no draws, a beautiful thing inside the game. Now, this is a subjective opinion, but let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. In my subjective opinion, it forces teams to spread over larger areas of the map to be effective. If you think about a map like Redshire, for example, Redshire Assault, you literally have to hold both flanks as the defending team, and if you don't, each one could be catastrophic. And so this kind of encourages the enemy team to actually try to invest in probing those defenses to see if the enemy team has set up their defenses correctly. And through this, when you've got more tanks spreading over a larger amount of the map, it doesn't feel like you get those frustrating snowball effects as far often as you would do in the standard battle. Again, in my subjective opinion. And I just feel that when everybody's spread around, you're getting less of those kind of like 7 fights where maybe you've gone there and you've only got 2 tanks. And it feels like there's more like 2v2s or 3v3s or 4v4s, because a lot of players will set up to try and provide cover fire, and then you'll have the bold players making the push plays. And oh man, it just felt like I'm sorry. I almost feel like I need to have a little bit of a cry, honestly, about the fact that all of those moments and all of those memories, those core memories for me in World of Tanks, are about to be just completely butchered from the game. And one of the reasons why you had this wonderful spread and forced attack on multiple flanks was not just the timer. It was also through separate spawns. Now, this is something that Wargaming do inside the standard battle as well. If you think about a Westfield, for example, some people on Westfield spawn below the hill, some people on Westfield spawn above the hill. And Assault, this happened very effectively on a map like Corellia. With the 2 spawns down towards the southeast, This encouraged players to attack, but it didn't stop tank destroyers from going back and getting up on the ridgeline, and it didn't stop light tanks and medium tanks from making aggressive plays through the middle. Just peak World of Tanks. Just peak World of Tanks. Literally, the best form of World of Tanks there ever was Karelia Assault. And I really wish that Wargaming, someone at Wargaming would take note of this and learn from it. That I genuinely think if more maps had been like a Karelia Assault and more people had enabled the Assault game mode, I'm not saying it should replace the standard battles, but for peak feel, as an experienced player, irreplaceable. Through shifting the attack axis as well on certain maps, Assault enabled effective spreading. If I think about a map like Karelia, on Karelia, not many people go towards the north. North feels like a flank that is just held. Sometimes it's a flank that is broken through in the standard battle, but I think most of the fighting occurs down towards the south in the heavy alleyway, with the tank destroyer sitting at the back, and funnily enough, a choke point that is now removed whenever the random event happens. So this shifting of the attack axis, I feel, can actually be used by Wargaming to spread teams more effectively over a larger amount of the map. And also in Assault, the effectiveness of pincers, massive. Quite often in the standard battle, pincers are just less important. And by encouraging teams to separate, and also through having only one defensive circle, both in Encounter and Assault, you can try and encourage teams to envelop their opponents to create strategies to be able to effectively deploy pincer attacks. And in the same way, Encounter rewards map control, in my opinion, much more than standard battles. And when I say map control, I'm specifically talking about the cap circle. When there's only one cap circle inside the game, you as a player don't need to be in two different parts of the map. If you think about Empire's Border, for example, one of the most frustrating maps for me personally, I always feel like I have to hang around in the middle of the map to see whether I actually have to attack the enemy or whether I have to make it all the way back towards my spawn to be able to try and protect it. For Encounter, you don't really have to worry about that, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. As long as you protect that cap circle, you can force your opponents to come to you through pressuring the cap circle and saying, right, you got a 3-minute timer, come at me, boys, and you're going to have to fight me out of it, otherwise I'm going to win the game. I love the way that it allowed you to create win conditions, and creating win conditions was a way to counter players just snowballing through the other flank. Think about steps. Steps Encounter, for example. With Steps Encounter, the meta feels like on Steps now is that most people camp up towards the northeast and don't actually push through. Not northeast, sorry. Kind of like far east on Steps on the standard battle, and everyone just shoves through the west. And they were doing that on an Encounter as well. It's just on Encounter, you could manage to cap out and force the enemy team to have to come at you aggressively rather than slowly like probe your defenses and make intelligent attacks. And when you can force your opponents to have to come and be reckless, then that allows you to catch them and to just add strategy to the way that you play World of Tanks. All what is going to be removed in the next patch. So to conclude, this is the end of an era. For many, it will be the end of World of Tanks as we know it, but not in a good way. Now, obviously, 2.0 is the end of an era in many ways. But personally, for me, apart from the fact that 2.0, when it adds tier 11 tanks, is going to really break how refined and how epic and how recognizable those tier 10 tanks are. Like, everybody knows a tier 10 mouse. I still can't remember the name of the Ratafata or whatever it is, the Ratatata, the tier 11. I'm sure maybe it's just because I'm getting old, or just the mouse is so iconic, right? The IS-7, it's iconic. And they're going to be replacing with these vehicles that I guess eventually might feel iconic, but they're not going to feel 15 years of iconic. But apart from that, I think that most of the things that Wargaming are adding into World of Tanks is a meta shift. It's a paradigm shift. It's an end of an era. But I think if there's one thing that's undoubtedly a horrendous change, it's the removal of Assault and Encounter. Since 2012, these maps, these game modes have been an intrinsic part of the way that we play the game. And Wargaming want to change the way that we play in 2.0 is fine. but it's not in a good way with regards to the assault and the encounter, and also with regards to the grand battle changes. One of the biggest issues is that Matchmaker 2.0 adds possible, uncertain, qualitative improvements to the game, but undoubtedly it removes two of the oldest game modes. And so for a lot of players, they won't recognize that their team now has a T110E3 instead of a Grilla when the enemy team has a Jaegeru. And maybe they didn't even care about when an assembly shop is released and those huge amounts of tier 10s are added to the matchmaker, and they didn't really care if there were 5 DBVs on each team for a week out of the year. Maybe that wasn't the biggest of issues to them. But undoubtedly they will hardly note, well, not hardly, but they will hard notice the fact that assault and encounter are being removed from the game. And that is a very, at least for me, a very measurable reduction in the quality and experience of World of Tanks. I think also that this will leave a bad taste in players' mouths, that the improvements of Matchmaker 2.0 came at the sacrifice of loved game modes. I don't know about you guys, but some of my most memorable games in World of Tanks history were all on assault and encounter. In fact, when I think about it, each of my account record damage was on assault. On my free-to-play account, the whatever it was, 11,200 damage game on Redshire assault just this year. And then a couple years ago, my Kampfpanzer, would you believe it, getting that near 11,000 damage total on my main account on Siegfried Line assault. Both of my highest damage games of all time were on assault. And the 10-minute timer had nothing to do with preventing it. Just the raw finesse, the raw aggression that you can have in assault. Just, in my opinion, the peak version of World of Tanks. So I wouldn't have either of those two records on either of my two accounts if it wasn't for the ability to play assault game modes. Personally, I think this is one of the worst changes in World of Tanks history, and I really think that Wargaming should have invested more in finding a way to make the game modes work. I think there's more than enough coming in 2.0 that Wargaming could have put off the matchmaker changes to try and find a way to make these game modes work. Or alternatively, they could have tried to just try and keep one of them and seeing how that had an impact on the matchmaker to see if the queue times got too long. I just feel that Wargaming are copping out with this, and they are the provider, they are the developer, they are the ones that are there to make things like this work and to spend the money and to try and to enable us to continue to enjoy the game in the same way that we have been for blooming 13 years. I also really believe that even the minority of players who play Assault and Encounter really love it. And I personally think this is one of the things that Wargaming is underestimating, that for a lot of players, Assault and Encounter being removed might actually be a deal breaker for at least the 2.0 matchmaker changes, or also maybe even just a deal breaker as to whether they will continue to enjoy World of Tanks as much, and maybe even outweigh all of the other positives that they would be receiving from a lot of the other aspects inside the game. Wargaming are heavily pushing the narrative that Matchmaker 2.0 brings balance and variety to the game. However, I'd like to clarify, this is something that if you've been playing on the EU1 server, you will have been testing and pretty much experiencing, in my opinion, for the last 6 months. And also, you know what, shame on Wargaming a little bit for not being more transparent to us, that when they were removing Assault and Encounter from the testing, that they told us that it was because, it's so we can get better data. Let's be honest, it really wasn't. They know about their plans years in advance. And the fact that they did this, it's why it hit me so hard that I had to move from EU1 to EU2 to be able to enjoy Assault and Encounter for the last 6 months. It wasn't the ping that I had to sacrifice. It was that I guess I knew in my heart that when Wargaming are testing something, that it was probably going to be going into the game. So one thing I'd like to highlight with this is that even though you have basically been playing Matchmaker 2.0, again, I don't know that for certain. I just feel it. I'm guessing here that if you have been playing on EU1 since their testing process, you've pretty much been playing what 2.0 matchmaking is going to feel like. So I strongly doubt that suddenly 2.0 that's it. Everything is going to change. Because if you've been playing EU1 at all, and you've had an experience of what 2.0, again, subjectively, and I can't be sure of this as to how it's going to feel. And I'd like to clarify and highlight to all of you, have you been playing Tier 10 since they made the announcement of Tier 11 tanks going into the game? I don't know what you guys think, but I'd say the Matchmaker has probably been the absolute worst it has ever been over this last week. Now, that will be partly because there are new players, well, returning players, I should say, coming back to the game and playing their Tier 10 tanks to get ready for Tier 11. But also, it will probably be because a lot of the most sweaty players now have Excel spreadsheets telling them how many millions of experience they have to grind on their different vehicles to be able to get ready for Tier 11. What this highlights to me is that even with Wargaming's enhanced 2.0 matchmaker changes, it highlights that it's all really down to the players and the players playing. And that a meta shift, as we've seen over the last week, far outweighs any changes that Wargaming can make. And Wargaming are trying to make Matchmaker 2.0 seem like this golden bullet that's going to fix all of your problems and make you enjoy World of Tanks way more. Sorry. I feel that my enjoyment of the game is actually going to decrease significantly from the loss of Insult and Encounter. And after playing on EU1 and playing on EU2 a lot over the last 6 months, I would love to be wrong, guys. I would love to be wrong. But I haven't been really enjoying World of Tanks EU1, which has been testing the enhanced matchmaker all that much. And so the final conclusion is that World of Tanks 2.0 is meant to be the future of the game, right? But it's a terrible shame that 2.0 Matchmaker came at the expense of killing off one of its oldest and dearest features. And again, I want to finish the video with that line that Wargaming highlighted. That again, they said that Assault Encounter and Grand Battles are being retired for now. I hope that's true. But honestly, I just don't feel like it's the case. I feel like if Wargaming were going to make this work, they would have already made it work. And if anyone from Wargaming is listening, and hopefully people will leave constructive feedback in the comments down below, it'd be really nice if any of you feel the same way about Assault that I do. And maybe it's something that Wargaming can invest into in the future. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, you know what? Thumbs up to you if you made it through this very wordy video. And I'd love to hear what you all think in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video and this breakdown, make sure you give it a thumbs up. But if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And again, let me know what you feel about Assault and Encounter. Do you come to the same conclusions as me? Are you really hopeful for Matchmaker 2.0? Do you think it's going to massively improve the amount that you enjoy the game? And how do you think about the fact that it has come at the expense of your ability to be able to play Assault and Encounter? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.